introduction to Theresa May, who is arriving to deliver her lectern at the Congressional Institute meeting of Republican members of the Senate and House of Representatives, the first foreign leader to address her. She's receiving applause from the Republicans' lair. And, of course, she will tomorrow morning be on her way to Washington to become the first foreign leader to meet President Trump face-to-face in the White House. Let's hear what she has to say and her reaction to the remarks he made earlier and to the reported tweets we've seen all week.
Thank you very much for that fantastic welcome. And can I say, Majority Leader McConnell, Mr. Speaker, distinguished members of the Senate and representatives of the House, I would like to thank Congress and the Congressional Institute for the invitation to be here today. The opportunity to visit the United States is always special, and to be invited to be the first serving head of government to address this important conference is an honour indeed. I defy any person to travel to this great country at any time and not to be inspired by its promise and its example. For more than 2 centuries, the very idea of America, drawn from history and given written form in a small hall not far from here, has lit up the world. That idea, that all are created equal and that all are born free, has never been surpassed in the long history of political thought. And it is here, on the streets and in the halls of this great city of Philadelphia, that the Founding Fathers first set it down, that the textbook of freedom was written, and that this great nation that grew from sea to shining sea was born. Since that day, it has been America's destiny to bear the leadership of the free world and to carry that heavy responsibility on its shoulders. But my country, the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland, has been proud to share that burden and to walk alongside you at every stage. For the past century, Britain and America, and the unique and special relationship that exists between us, have taken the idea conceived by those 56 rank-and-file ordinary citizens, as President Reagan called them, forward. And because we have done so, time and again, it is the relationship between us that has defined the modern world. 100 years ago this April, it was your intervention in the First World War that helped Britain, France, our friends in the Commonwealth and other allies to maintain freedom in Europe. A little more than 75 years ago, you responded to the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor by joining Britain in the Second World War and defeating fascism not just in the Pacific, but in Africa and Europe too. And later, in the aftermath of these wars, our 2 countries led the West through the Cold War, confronting communism and ultimately defeating it, not just through military might, but by winning the war of ideas, and by proving that open, liberal, democratic societies will always defeat those that are closed, coercive, and cruel. But the leadership provided by our 2 countries through the special relationship has done more than win wars and overcome adversity. It made the modern world. The institutions upon which that world relies were so often conceived or inspired by our 2 nations working together. The United Nations, in need of reform, but vital still, has its foundations in the special relationship. From the original declaration of St. James's Palace to the declaration by United Nations signed in Washington and drafted themselves by Winston Churchill and President Franklin D. Roosevelt. The World Bank and International Monetary Fund, born in the post-World War world at Bretton Woods, were conceived by our two nations working together. And NATO, the cornerstone of the West's defence, was established on the bonds of trust and mutual interests that exist between us. Some of these organisations are in need of reform and renewal to make them relevant to our needs today. But we should be proud of the role our two nations working in partnership played in bringing them into being and in bringing peace and prosperity to billions of people as a result. Because it is through our actions over many years, working together to defeat evil or to open up the world, that we have been able to fulfill the promise of those who first spoke of the special nature of the relationship between us, the promise of freedom, liberty, and the rights of man. We must never cease, Churchill said, to proclaim in fearless tones the great principles of freedom and the rights of man, which are the joint inheritance of the English-speaking world, and which, through Magna Carta, the Bill of Rights, the habeas corpus, trial by jury, and the English common law, find their most famous expression in the American Declaration of Independence. So it is my honour and privilege to stand before you today in this great city of Philadelphia, to proclaim them again, to join hands as we pick up that mantle of leadership once more, to renew our special relationship and to recommit ourselves to the responsibility of leadership in the modern world. And it is my honour and privilege to do so at this time, as dawn breaks on a new era of American renewal. For I speak to you not just as Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, but as a fellow Conservative who believes in the same principles that underpin the agenda of your party: the value of liberty, the dignity of work, the principles of nationhood, family, economic prudence, patriotism, and putting power in the hands of the people. Principles instilled in me from a young age, principles my parents taught me in the vicarage in southern England in which I was raised. And I know it is these principles that you have put at the heart of your plan for government. And your victory in these elections gives you the opportunity to put them at the heart of this new era of American renewal too. President Trump's victory, achieved in defiance of all the pundits and the polls, and rooted not in the corridors of Washington, but in the hopes and aspirations of working men and women across this land. Your party's victory in both the Congress and the Senate, where you swept all before you, secured with great effort and achieved with an important message of national renewal. And because of this, because of what you have done together, because of that great victory you have won, America can be stronger, greater, and more confident in the years ahead. And a newly emboldened, confident America is good for the world. An America that is strong and prosperous at home is a nation that can lead abroad. But you cannot and should not do so alone. You have said that it is time for others to step up, and I agree. Sovereign countries cannot outsource their security and prosperity to America, and they should not undermine the alliances that keep us strong by failing to step up and play their part. This is something This is something Britain has always understood. It's why Britain is the only country in the G20, other than yours, to meet its commitment to spend 2% of GDP on defence and to invest 20% of that in upgrading equipment. It is why Britain is the only country in the G20 to spend 0.7% of gross national income on overseas development. It is why my first act as Prime Minister last year was to lead the debate in Parliament that ensured the renewal of Britain's independent nuclear deterrent. And it is why the government I lead will increase spending on defence in every year of this Parliament. It is why Britain is a leading member, alongside the United States, of the coalition working successfully to defeat Daesh. Why we have agreed to send 800 troops to Estonia and Poland as part of NATO's forward presence in Eastern Europe. Why we are increasing our troop contribution to NATO's Resolute Support mission that defends the Afghan government from terrorism. And it is why we are reinforcing our commitment to peacekeeping operations in Kosovo, South Sudan and Somalia. And it is why Britain is leading the way in pioneering international efforts to crack down on modern slavery, one of the great scourges of our world wherever it is found. And I hope you will join us in that cause, and I commend Senator Corker in particular for his work in this field, and it's good to have met him here today. As Americans know, the United Kingdom is by instinct and history a great global nation that recognises its responsibilities to the world. And as we end our membership of the European Union, as the British people voted with determination and quiet resolve to do last year, we have the opportunity to reassert our belief in a confident, sovereign and global Britain, ready to build relationships with old friends and new allies alike. We will build a new partnership with our friends in Europe. We're not turning our back on them or on the interests and the values that we share. It remains overwhelmingly in our interests and in those of the wider world that the EU should succeed. And for as long as we remain members, we will continue to play our full part, just as we will continue to cooperate on security, foreign policy and trade once we have left. But we have chosen a different future for our country. A future that sees us restore our parliamentary sovereignty and national self-determination, and to become even more global and internationalist in action and in spirit. A future that sees us take back control of the things that matter to us, things like our national borders and immigration policy and the way we decide and interpret our own laws, so that we are able to shape a better, more prosperous future for the working men and women of Britain. A future that sees us step up with confidence to a new, even more internationalist role, where we meet our responsibilities to our friends and allies, champion the international cooperation and partnerships that project our values around the world, and continue to act as one of the strongest and most forceful advocates for business, free markets and free trade anywhere around the globe. This is a vision of a future that my country can unite around, and that I hope your country, as our closest friend and ally, can welcome and support. So as we rediscover our confidence together, as you renew your nation just as we renew ours, we have the opportunity, indeed the responsibility, to renew the special relationship for this new age. We have the opportunity to lead together again, because the world is passing through a period of change. And in response to that change, we can either be passive bystanders, or we can take the opportunity once more to lead, and to lead together. I believe it is in our national interest to do so, because the world is increasingly marked by instability and threats that risk undermining our way of life and the very things that we hold dear. The end of the Cold War did not give rise to a new world order. It did not herald the end of history. It did not lead to a new age of peace, prosperity, and predictability in world affairs. For some, the citizens of Central and Eastern Europe in particular, it brought new freedom. But across the world, ancient ethnic, religious, and national rivalries that had been frozen through the decades of the Cold War, returned. New enemies of the West and our values, in particular in the form of radical Islamists, have emerged. And countries with little tradition of democracy, liberty, and human rights, notably China and Russia, have grown more assertive in world affairs. The rise of the Asian economies, China, yes, but democratic allies like India too, is hugely welcome. Billions are being lifted out of poverty, and new markets for our industries are opening up. But these events, coming as they have at the same time as the financial crisis and its fallout, as well as a loss of confidence in the West following 9/11 and difficult military interventions in Iraq and Afghanistan, have led many to fear that in this century we will experience the eclipse of the West.